Since the beginning of time, we have been naturally programmed to have that fight or flight response when danger is around, depending on the danger. And as many of you know, this stems from the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system in our brains. The sympathetic nervous system is all about survival and is based in the ego. This truly keeps us alive and wants to protect us, most notably when we are confronted with things like wild animals, lions, if a fire were to occur, stuff like that. This makes us experience a whole range of fight or flight symptoms, which in return can translate into feelings of feeling fear, pride, anger, etc. And these feelings, when measured through testing, research shows causes harm to our bodies. And the ego makes us attached to these states because it's based on what we see, taste, touch in this 3D reality. Now, our spiritual self, on the other hand, can be considered the parasympathetic nervous system or can be turned on via the parasympathetic nervous system. And the feelings that accompany this are neutrality, oneness, love, and so on. And these consider to strengthen us, not weaken or harm us. This is also how you develop the state of trusting and allowing, and the side that really makes manifestation work, because the parasympathetic system is turned on when one is relaxed and not stressed, and also allows for people to be put into the alpha state or that theta state, or aka that state akin to sleep. Now, why does all of this matter, you might be asking? Because to me, in my opinion, in order to learn how to properly navigate the 3D, or to get the 3D to conform, as a lot of you guys like using that word when manifesting, we all must understand the map of consciousness and how to flow with it and use it in the 3D instead of avoiding it. Made famous by Dr. Hawkins, the map of consciousness is essentially a roadmap of feelings and emotions we will experience in the 3D on any given day throughout our entire lifetime. Where the problems come in and what people don't realize is most of us, we are operating either on the top half of the map of consciousness, or we are operating mainly on the lower part of the map of consciousness. A lot of us, in my opinion, are operating on the lower part, just to be frank. But let's take a look at the map of consciousness. The map of consciousness reads as follows: enlightenment, peace, joy, love, reason, acceptance, willingness, neutrality, courage, pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, shame. Also, another name for the map of consciousness is also known as the vibrational scale. Looking at this map of consciousness, you can see what you are most likely going to experience by looking at the emotions on the left side, and then seeing on the right side, you can see what kind of state you will experience based on the types of emotions you are feeling in this conscious 3D. Whether you realize it or not, every day you wake up, you are operating on this scale. But most importantly, you are making daily decisions based on how you feel on this scale. Most people are operating on the lower half of this vibrational scale, which means most people are going through life, living life with their sympathetic nervous system turned on and calling the shots, which also means there is a good chance that your ego is calling the shots and not your higher self. Moving through life with the sympathetic state is also a reason why panic attacks and all of the above happen, because you're in a low vibrational frequency. See, when you are in a constant state of your sympathetic being turned on, when you are constantly operating from the ego, you are constantly living in a carnal, mundane state. Oftentimes getting mad at trivial things, not realizing you're going to make decisions probably for the worse. In this state, you often become impulsive and reactive without thinking, constantly worried about what other people think, constantly worried about the worst possible outcomes, afraid to move, stuck in the past, and all of the above. Also, you are most likely into being right often and winning, not realizing you wanting to win so many trivial battles is ultimately, in the end, going to cause you to ultimately end up losing the war, most likely, whatever that war may be. So you have to ask yourself questions like, what's the point of being right? Be right at what expense? What's the point of being right when the results are going to be wrong? Are you truly satisfied with being right, or are you satisfied with getting the results you want? Because ultimately, the only thing that matters in many instances is the results. For instance, is calling out your SP and getting into a lot of trivial fights worth it a lot of times? A lot of times when you really think and look back, that answer is really no. In the moment when you are the old version of yourself, you might have thought those fights were worth it and not trivial. But when you get better and you look back, you realize a lot of the stuff you got mad at was actually very futile and could have been avoided. Now, don't get me wrong, calling out someone or shaming someone and using the bottom half of the map of consciousness can work very well for some people, but only if they don't crash out as a result of it. You have to learn how to pick and choose to determine if it's really worth it and appropriate. And also, you have to learn how to channel the bottom half of the map of consciousness to use those emotions to your advantage. See, the problem for many of us is we use those bottom half of those emotions on the map of consciousness. We use those to our disadvantage, doing things like creating false stories in your head that are probably lies just to prove yourself right, to win these futile battles. See, the thing about the ego is the ego, a lot of times it always wants to be right and it always wants to protect you and make up all types of assumptions just so it can rest and be right. Or it will start an unnecessary fight, for instance, with your SP that didn't even need to happen. Say, for instance, your SP leaves or ghosts you without an answer. Your sympathetic nervous system is now turned on and is not relaxed and is now creating a story that it can 100% believe is true, even if it's not true and it never happened. Or your ego could possibly be so rampant that it could cause you to get in an argument with your SP just because your ego always wants to win and always wants to be right. And the argument totally did not even need to occur. But it's all because you don't know how to let stuff go. So, yeah, you might win these small battles with your SP, but at what cost? You'll ultimately end up losing the war, most likely, which is the relationship. The thing you got to realize is hindsight is 2020 for almost everybody. So many people are going to look back and they're going to realize how trivial some of the fights they started with a SP or a family member or whoever were. And they're going to live with that regret at the fact that they started such trivial fights and ended the relationship for whatever the reason was, or at the fact that they did not act on saving the relationship based on ego or whatever the case might be. I mean, really think about it. When you're on your deathbed, you're not going to be looking back thinking, oh, my SP or my parents didn't align with my political beliefs, or my current wife or husband didn't align with my beliefs, or how your old SP or your current SP are constantly always leaving the bathroom light on, or how they were introverted and you were extroverted. 30, 40, 50 years from now, you're not going to be thinking about, oh, I can't believe Donald Trump won the election. We won the election by a lot. We won it by a lot. Kamala couldn't stand a chance. Neither could Sleepy Joe. We won this election by numbers never seen before. Probably never will be seen again. That's what we did. We make America great again. Nobody is going to give a fuck about that. 30, 40, 50 years from now, when you were on your deathbed, none of this shit that's going on now currently in the 3D is going to matter. What you will be thinking about during those time frames down the line is you're going to be thinking about all of the regrets you had about life. You were going to be thinking about all the coulda, woulda, shouldas, but you didn't. Thinking about the action that you didn't take. You're going to think about how all of the stuff that you worried about 30, 40, 50 years prior was so trivial, and how you potentially lost good people because you were worried about something so trivial in the moment. Now, of course, everything I'm saying is nuanced. So don't get lost in the explanation and think that I'm saying this applies to literally every situation in a person's life, because that's not what I'm saying. The goal is changed behavior and the best results possible. Not to be standing on the hill, beating your chest, talking about you're the king of the hill because you won and you were always right. When you drive someone away from you because you are more determined to be right than getting the results, you do more damage than good, even if you are saying the thing that's right. Don't waste any more time on trying to prove people wrong and winning futile battles. Focus on getting the results. Even Jesus spoke in parables, and he wasn't actively trying to prove people wrong. He would speak in parables and then later explain what it meant. He wasn't busy on people listening and necessarily believing. He was focused on getting results and saving the world. He was about his business and literally said, I am about my Father's business. Whether you believe or not, I am about my Father's business. You can think that I'm wrong. I don't care. I'm still going to be about my business. His Father's business was the results. Here's an analogy for you. Let me ask you this. What's the point of scoring 30 points a game, but your team loses every game and gets blown out every single game, but you scored 30 points? What's the point of being the most prettiest woman in the room or the prettiest woman on earth, but nobody wants to wife you? This is exactly how many of you are operating on the lower level on the map of consciousness. Something I often say to people that I work with is I say, do you guys want to be right or do you want to have peace? Peace is what you should be after. But the only way to achieve that peace is to start moving up the levels of consciousness. Because in the 3D, it is pretty much guaranteed that you will experience most of the levels of consciousness, especially the bottom half, like I was saying earlier. I mean, it's almost as if we have been trained to focus on the bottom half of the map of consciousness instead of the top half of the map of consciousness intentionally, especially because of things like news, social media, television. But that's all about to change because starting in the beginning of 2025, I'm going to go through the entire map of consciousness and explain every category and how it relates to you operating in the 3D when it comes to manifesting an SP or anything else for that matter, as well as understanding and using these levels of consciousness to help navigate the 3D and to use all of these levels of consciousness to your advantage. Because the 3D is very real, contrary to what many coaches say on YouTube. And quite frankly, they do a terrible job at telling people how to act and how to manage the 3D while in the process of waiting for their manifestation to show up. And we all need to learn how to work with the 3D instead of avoiding it. But until then, do like Kendrick says. Turn his TV off, turn his TV off.